Hello everyone and welcome to this evening's edition of Ramola D Reports. I'm here today with a very special guest, Kimberly Arth from Minnesota, who's here to tell us a great deal about her own special experience with doctors and psychiatrists in a hospital and her experience with energy weapons. But first, before we go into her story, I should tell you a little bit about her background. Kimberly has worked in various capacities. She has training in biochemistry and biology at the college level. She's worked as a researcher, and over the past few years, she's become a very focused researcher in the areas of Lyme disease, nanotechnology, and all sorts of modern ailments. So literally speaking with her, I find that, she is a treasure trove of information on what's currently going on in our world today, all of the strange things, as we know, that are going on with the chemtrails, the nanotech aerosols that we're all being rained down upon, and various other things of that nature. So she is very, very knowledgeable, and she's been able to send me all sorts of links to YouTube videos that I'm yet to fully explore, but that I hope to explore and that I hope to return to so that I can have other very focused conversations on those subjects with Kim. So welcome, Kim. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for listening to my story. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You may want to turn up your audio a little bit.
Oh, it's Max.
It's Max? Okay. So I should tell our viewers that we've been having a few audio issues already, so I'm going to try to kind of turn it up over here and hope for the best. I can hear you, but, it's just not super loud.
I'll try to talk loud.
Okay. All right. So Kim, where shall we start? Shall we start with the whole story of how that first instance of going to the hospital kind of began? There was something that happened, right, where you started to begin to feel very sick. And when was this? And what was the backstory there? What was the lead up to it?
This was in February last year, and the weirdest thing happened is when I was about to go to bed, all of a sudden I felt these energies hit me, these strong waves of energy. And all of a sudden I felt very ill, and it was hard to eat. And after a couple days, actually several days, it was difficult to keep anything down. And it got to a point of where I hadn't eaten in 30 days, and the last 5 days I couldn't even keep any fluids down. I ended up at the hospital, and upon getting in there, they said my electrolytes were very low, and they had never seen anyone alive who had numbers that I had had. And of course, the doctors, you always think that they're exaggerating, so I'm asking the nurse, you haven't seen anyone worse than me? And it's just like, no, never. And I go, well, how long have you been a nurse? She goes, like 26 years. The doctor says, yes, it's been the same for me. And he looked like a relatively young guy, and I'm like, yeah, and so how long have you been practicing? And it's just like, of course, he doesn't want to answer because every doctor wants to be the first one who diagnosed, the brontosaurus arthritis or something for the first time. So he wouldn't answer that. But it's they all were convinced, they were quite surprised that I survived. And while I'm in there, they brought this test back, and they said I tested positive for marijuana instantly. And it's like, wait a minute, I never used the stuff. How is that possible? And they're just like, and even my friend was there, and who brought me in, and he's just like, no, she never uses stuff. I mean, she passed kidney stones and didn't have an aspirin. I passed a kidney stone the size of a marble, and I didn't even take an aspirin. Of course, I used a hot water bottle and lemon juice by the time I finally left, but I mean, I was never one for using any medications like that whatsoever, and so it's just like, okay, I know something's up. And they start doing all these tests, and I talk about how this fluid has been coming out of my gums for the longest time, and it's not the same consistency, and I don't know what it is, and I keep packing it up, and it's like building up this plaque in my throat, and you almost feel like you're choking on it, and just like, okay, this one's got psychological issues, she just doesn't want to eat. They go, well, maybe there's a strict...
So hold on just a minute, if you don't mind, Kim. So basically, you had actual physical medical complaints, and you couldn't eat. Oh, yeah. And so when you mentioned this, they didn't take you seriously? They just jumped to conclusions?
They even said that I suffered acute renal failure. That's on my list at the hospital. And then they were looking for a stricture, and so they put me under, and supposedly they stuck this thing down my throat, some GI test, and it went down through my stomach to see if they found anything that was blocking it, and they said no. And then they did a CT scan on my belly, which you really can't make anything out of, and then they did a colonoscopy. So I was out twice that they put me under, and when they found out, they're talking about sending me home, and when they found out, well, another part of the story is while they're doing this, they asked me if I had any food allergies or any allergies to medications, and I started mentioning, well, I have reactions to sugar. I tend to break out when I have sugar, and soy products, and also gluten, and I start mentioning this list. High fructose corn syrup doesn't work with me real well. And the woman shuts me up and she said, I don't care what your food allergies are. What medicines are you allergic to? And I go, well, there was one time when I had my wisdom tooth, there seemed to be a reaction there, but I don't know what it is. She goes, okay, fine. And so they started giving me these IV solutions, and it turned out one time they gave me dextrose, which is sugar in it. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden my whole body broke out in hives and my throat started to shut down. And they did this every day I was there. I had one of those reactions, and I almost died each time. And they're running in and giving me this IV Benadryl. And so all of a sudden when the doctor found out that my father was an attorney, all of a sudden I had this clearly, I had this mental issue. I had all these psychological problems. I brought all this on myself, and they put me on a 72-hour hold, locked me down, took me in an ambulance, and took me to Fargo for a 72-hour hold.
So this is a very extraordinary part of your story, Kim. So literally, even though you went to the hospital, you ended up going to the hospital primarily because you had a physical issue. You had a medical problem. What happened was... Sorry?
I couldn't breathe. I could barely walk. When I couldn't breathe anymore, that's when I was willing to go into the hospital.
Yeah, I know.
They took me across state lines, over 70 miles away.
That's what I wanted to talk about. Why on earth would they do that? They took you across state lines, but they basically put you, they did this Baker Act thing on you, right? They put you in a 72-hour psychiatric hold. Yeah. Saying that you were a psychiatric patient rather than a medical patient, a health patient, somebody who needed health care, somebody who needed medical care. They decided what you needed was mental health care. They threw you in an ambulance and they drove you 70 miles across state lines to the next state over.
Oh yeah, over 70 miles. Then I was explaining that years earlier I got diagnosed with Lyme, and I was wondering if this was a complication due to Lyme. And they said, well, we did test for you at that in the last place, and it came out negative, so no, you don't have Lyme. I go, well, you know, one time I threw up, and it looked like almost like a worm was in there. And they're just like, oh, now they have delusional parasitosis. And I also did a cleanse, and it looked like pinworms or something were coming out of me. And oh no, you're crazy. We did tests and there's nothing there. And it's just like, okay, I don't know what's wrong. What's wrong with me? Why couldn't I keep food down for a period of time?
So basically they did not believe you, and they decided to give you a diagnosis of delusional parasitosis, which is in the DSM.
They also started with schizophrenia. They labeled me with about 6 different things. Non-specified psychosis. This one doctor, Dr. Eric Swenson, he gave me about 6 different diagnoses in the 5 minutes that I was there. First, they tried, though, with another doctor to diagnose me with an eating disorder. This is all due to an eating disorder. And this specialist, this doctor, dealt specifically with eating disorders, came out and said she doesn't have an eating disorder. And then, so that didn't work out, so then they brought somebody else, and then after meeting me with 5 minutes, and they only had a short period of time that my hold was left, he immediately diagnosed me with 6 different things. And then when it finally got through the courts, the only thing that was left on there was delusional parasitosis. And when I later got out and got tested, here, I don't know if you can see it, but this is... Can you see that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
This is my Here, if I can get it in the...
Yes, yeah. You've got some numbers there. I don't quite see what's to the left.
Here, IGX.
Yeah.
You can see that there's 4 things underneath it that's lined. And it says if you test positive for 2 or more, you've got it. I've got 4 of those bars.
I see, yeah.
2 or more, you have it. Okay. Then I tested positive for babesia here. Can you see that? My serum? Babesiosis, I have a serum of 80. If you have to be under 20 to be negative. So I'm over double the amount for babesia. Babesia is a parasite.
Okay, I was going to ask.
So I have babesia and I have Lyme that I tested for, and both of them I was delusional thinking that I had it. And so one of the doctors actually submitted before the court that I was non-specified psychosis and I was delusional. This was Dr. Jorgensen when she got passed on my case from Dr. Eric Swanson, that they decided that I had to be packed away because I thought I had Lyme disease.
Now these reports that you have in front of you that you just showed us, did they come from a previous medical visit, or where did they come from?
They came after.
They came after.
I had one previous before that, but it didn't count because I didn't view that he was a real doctor because he wasn't an MD. So then I got the test through, it had to go through California for an independent lab, and that went through IGeneX. And when you start discovering about Lyme, you find out that some of these tests aren't very accurate, and they're deliberately not very accurate. If you look at the person who's in charge, there's a little RT snippet of one of the leaders in the ILADS group where she's talked, which is a Lyme group. She discusses how up to 90% of the tests that are done on Lyme are inaccurate.
Wow.
So when you look at that thing that I sent you with rinse, what will be done for years from now, that list, one of the things that they said would be difficult to diagnose and treat illnesses. So if you can't diagnose it, how are you going to treat it?
Good point.
It's going to be very difficult. And then the second one that was down there as well, it was using hospitals as prisons. And so I'm in there.
Okay, I think at this point, Kim, we have to probably tell our viewers what you're talking about, because you're referring to an article that's posted on the REN's website, right? And has to do with disclosures about New World Order, Agenda 21, horrors and dystopian realities that they're looking ahead to. And one of those is, it's the whole FEMA camp story, and it's converting hospitals to prisons and so on and so forth, right?
It's not really talking about FEMA camps. This was Dr. Day. This was back in 1969 where they were talking about the future of this country.
Okay.
It's in various places, but in that one link that I sent you, I just sent that link to you because it was one of the links I found, and it had everything neatly compiled of about a dozen different futuristic things that they plan to do. And one of them was to turn hospitals into prisons. And so while I'm in there, all of a sudden they're trying to push me through and commit me and stuff me full of drugs. And while I'm in there, it's like, wait a minute. One of the people that they finally got, they needed a family member to try and commit me on this, to verify it. So they pulled in this person that I had never met before. Her name was Marlene. She was the second cousin that I had never met before. She happened to work with these doctors. She knew all these doctors personally for decades. I met her in there for the first time. We talked to each other for a total of maybe 2 or 3 hours in the whole time that I had been there.
Is she really related to you? She's really related to you?
Yeah, she's really related to me. But not many people talk to her because they think she's crazy. Marlene, it turns out, she's been married 6 times. And every husband had said that she destroyed their lives. And she got divorced 5 times, and the reason she didn't get divorced 6 times is because one of the guys died. He even wanted to divorce her right before he died. And her brother talked her out of it, saying, she's going to throw you in a nursing home, and this way you still have your home. So that prevented it. But while she was in there one time, she had to leave early for a meeting that she had to go to at the Shriners. And apparently she's known for her Freemason connections, as well as all these other people there, and even her son is a Shriner. This is kind of a big thing, I guess, in North Dakota, especially in the medical industry. So one of the things that she's known for is like with her brother and her husband. So she'd go up and start beating on him as hard as she could, and if they pushed her back, then she said, "Oh, I'm abused. Oh, I've been hit," or "Oh, I've been pushed away, and I'm a battered wife," and all this other stuff. And another thing she did is when her mother was on her deathbed, she went to her and said this about her cousin: "If you don't give me exactly everything I want, I'm going to ruin Marcus," which is her brother. She said, "I'm going to make sure his life is destroyed." Well, we're talking about targeted individuals then. Shortly thereafter, this woman came out of nowhere claiming that he was stalking her. And the judge didn't want to accept the plea of guilty because he didn't believe it at all. And he was trying to convince my cousin that people were really out to get him. And he goes, "I know I didn't do this," but he goes, "I can't accept the guilty plea though." And then the police put pressure on him and said, "If you do not allow us to do this to you, we're going to do something worse to you." Kind of like years ago, I was told if I didn't shut up, that they were going to dump child porn on my computer. I had somebody actually come up to me. And then you start wondering, okay, I'm missing all these emails. I've lost like 12 emails in the last month. I lost a couple YouTube accounts. What's being done under my name? Because I switched the passwords. They're still open. I told you, they could be writing manifestos on there that I don't even know, saying I'm a member of heaven knows what a cult, and I'm planning to do all these things. And who knows, they could be writing a letter on there, sending it to the White House, saying I'm threatening the president. Heaven knows. I mean, they have done so many things to me. My brakes have been cut in my car so many times. It's insane. Well, anyway, he ends up pleading guilty, so now he's on the sidelines. He's living a life of everything he describes: the trouble at work, car troubles, all kinds of troubles with things breaking in the house. I mean, just difficulties at work, people threatening to fire him. I mean, everything that kind of follows. The only thing that he's missing is the directed energy weapons. That's the one thing he's missing. And I think if he had that, it would wake him up. But other than that, he just has a series of bad luck, and he just doesn't understand it. And I think that came from his sister. But she did say that she had the ability to ruin his life, and all her husband said, "She ruined my life."
And you told me when we were talking a little bit earlier about her that the reason that she appears to have so much power is kind of connected to some of her belief systems and who she's connected to, right?
Well, she's very tight with that hospital. She told me that she was bragging about her connections in that hospital when she was there, about how tight she is with all the doctors and everything, and how she knows anything. She goes, "My connections are extensive." And she was bragging about that. And when she got, they wrote on my medical records of her saying that I should be committed, and her father wants her committed, so if you'll hold her for this period of time until he can get here. Well, she may have talked him into that, for all I know. But my father has a lot of things that he'd like to hide, and it would benefit him greatly if that happened to me. He's not exactly the nicest person either. And that actually worked out to my favor at the end, and which got me out. When I ended up being taken, they decided to commit me and move forward. I found out on part of the writing, here it is. This is what they ended up taking me in on, the 72-hour, was Marlene. It turns out, in talking to cousin Marlene, now this is a woman I had never met before, and then I find out later they wrote on the papers that, "Oh, cousin Marlene, last time I saw her, she was at my mother's funeral, and the only problem is I wasn't at her mother's funeral and I never met her." So she lies.
So she lied. She created a story.
Yeah, that she even met me before, which she didn't. And then it says here, she prevents new information that Kim has delusional process involving biofilm interfering with digestion. She believes that she cannot swallow, and worms are coming out of her saliva and feces, which test negative, and believes there are people living underground with intent of harming us. She's a danger to self due to her delusions. Now, part of that is...
That's unbelievable.
But part of it I did say, but it's completely taken out of context.
Okay.
It turns out later on, I find out that Marlene had had a nervous breakdown, had been hospitalized for 3 months. It turns out it's looking like she was hospitalized at Sanford by some of the doctors that were treating me. And then, what was it? She's on medication and she's on disability for mental illness.
Wow.
So one of the reasons that explains why it was difficult to talk to her when you start talking to her, she's just all over the place. It's crazy. Even my friend who was there said it's very difficult to hold a conversation with her.
And yet this person kind of put the mechanism into motion to actually commit to you.
Yeah, but she was friends with the doctors who were doing it. So these doctors, somehow, they missed all these problems with these tests. No one's that incompetent. I mean, they missed that I had Lyme. They weren't going to test for the mycoplasma, which is the biofilm. And there was a lot of evidence that was coming out of me. The stuff was coming out of me that looked like gasoline. It was like rainbows on it, and it was like this plastic film that was coming out on top. I'm asking if this was something important. They're just like, no, just drink more water. Well, the stuff didn't come out, and I was lucky that I got online before I got in there, and I found out some information on this biofilm. And so part of it was the asparagus would flush it through you, and I was taking a lot of that, and it did help immensely. But when I got over to the other hospital, now they switched me to Sanford Cell, which is the lockdown unit. I end up there, and the gal who's checking me in, one of the reasons that I'm crazy is I think I have biofilm, and so because all the stuff is coming out of my gums, and then she mentioned biofilm, and then this nurse that's checking me in goes, oh yes, we're all familiar with biofilm, especially the doctor you're about to meet, the ones that deal with eating disorders. She knows all about biofilm. Yeah, it comes out from your teeth. And then all of a sudden my cousin started having a meltdown. I'm like, no, there's no such thing. Because the doctor treated me like I'm crazy. There is no such thing. No, you're crazy.
This is extraordinary. So literally somebody was framing you and trapping you and trying to give you a diagnosis of being a psychiatric case. Somebody who had a major mental illness.
Yeah, and then on top of it, when my cousin's leaving the lockdown unit over there, someone runs up to her in the ward that knew her and just like, oh, Marlene, and runs over and gives her a hug. So she knew people on that floor that worked there. It's like it was a complete setup. And no matter what you said, they weren't going to believe you. And so later on, when I was in there, and I was able to finally get some phone calls out because they were kind of blocking my phones and they prevent me every way, shape, and form from getting any medical records because I requested them. Finally, when I got before the court for a hearing before the judge, I said they were going to immediately plead no contest.
So can you hold on 1 minute? Before we go into that story, perhaps what we should do is kind of delineate what exactly happened. You got driven across straight lines to this hospital in North Dakota, which is Sanford Hospital, right? And you were immediately put in the psychiatric ward over there?
I was put on a 72-hour hold in the first hospital because they were going to say, we'll check for any other possible medical problems, which they weren't checking for anything. Immediately they were saying you're mentally ill. They found out that I had a mother and grandmother that died of MS, and so immediately go, oh, all her delusions are due to MS. And so they did an MRI on me, and then they came out and said, they held it for 2 days. I didn't get the results, and they said, no, you don't have any MS. But what I'm thinking of is when I was under, after the pains I'm getting now, they may have put implants in me, and that's why they went crazy and were trying to hide everything. And I'm wondering if that MRI even was of me and they couldn't release it.
This is a very important point to make, and I should probably underline for anybody who's watching this show for the first time, one of the things we do consider on this channel is covert implantation and the ways in which doctors and hospitals are indeed involved in covertly implanting people, because all sorts of non-consensual medical experimentation and military experimentation is currently going on, and people are indeed stepping forward and reporting this kind of thing. So what Kim is talking about is the possibility, and it's a very real possibility, of having been implanted.
Yeah, like right now, the buzzing in my ears just started. It just ramped up. I used to have a very low buzzing in my ear, but after I got out of the hospital, it got really intense. So I'm in this ward, and basically they're trying to make it difficult for me. I'm not hardly allowed to make any phone calls. They're making it very difficult. The food just they're denying me food and then saying it's due to my belief system. So knowing I'm a vegetarian, they'll throw meat on everything. So I'll ask for asparagus, and then they'll throw turkey on top of it. Or I'll get eggs, and they'll throw bacon on it. And then I'm being difficult, and it's due to my delusional belief system. That's just all that they'd write on there. It's just
That's outrageous.
So I was writing on there when they were denying me food, and I was asking for more asparagus or whatever, because that's supposed to clean out this biofilm. And it did a wonderful job when I could get some. There were a couple nurses that did help me in there with that did sympathize and could see what was going on. And how can I explain this? Well, anyway, when they were done, some days I would only be allowed 8 asparagus or 12 asparagus. That's what I get for a day. And so when I got in the hospital, I was 105 pounds. I'm 5'7". And so now they're depriving me of food, and I'm asking for more. And I asked to be weighed on a scale every day. And one of the nurses attendants came in and said, "Okay, yeah, I'll get it for you." And he weighed me, and they found out I got weighed, and I dropped below 110 because I had gained some weight by then, and now I was like 109.9. And I'm just like, okay, I'm losing weight. You guys aren't giving me any food. And they're just like, who gave you a scale? How were you able to find out your weight? They were just having a nervous breakdown over the whole thing. And so I'm just like, I demand to be weighed every day. I demand it.
That's brilliant. I'm so glad that you did that, because unfortunately that's what people have to do these days. You just have to stand up for yourself as a patient. Speak out for yourself, patients' rights and everything.
Everyone was telling me to cooperate with these people, and what helped me is I did have a bit of psychology background. It was one of my majors for a period of time. I did work in a halfway house for schizophrenics, so I could see some of the games that they were playing. And my stepfather, 2 of his 3 majors were in psychology. So you really couldn't get by in my house with not having some background or understanding what was behind certain things. So no matter what you say or what you do, they will twist and pervert everything against you. So I made sure not to go to any of their groups, not to cooperate with anything, discuss as little as possible. And had I agreed with them in any way, shape, or form, I would have been committed and I would have been gone. So everybody's telling you to cooperate with the system. Had I cooperated with the system, I would permanently have been gone, and nobody would have known what would happen to me. I'd be drooling all over myself with these forced medications.
That's an excellent point, but take us back a little bit. So they supposedly put you on a 72-hour hold, but it sort of sounds like you were kept much longer than that. How did they pull that off?
Well, then that's when they said, now we're looking for the real problems, when they moved me to the next hospital, which was Sanford South, and their other unit. And so then they had to bring someone in from Ottertail County who twisted and perverted everything I said, and even got it backwards, where I said this didn't happen, and they put it did. And it's like, okay, wait a minute, something's going on here. And then Marlene went in as the social workers leaving from Ottertail County. My cousin Marlene's there, and she's running out with my dad, who came to visit me, and they're talking to her privately. And when I get the paperwork and found out what they said to me, it was all lies. They were trying to get me committed. And it's like, now all of a sudden I see what's going on. This isn't right. And so I'm not cooperating with anybody. This is screwed up. And I start just not cooperating with anything. I start writing things down. I start taking notes. I'm trying to get a hold of people that I know outside to get a real lawyer. They signed me up with this lawyer who clearly wasn't on my side. By the time they get me into the court, which is just a couple days later, they try to put down, the lawyer tells me before I go in, if you plead no contest with us, they have the right to put you through electroconvulsive therapy. They can do whatever they want. So I was essentially threatened with ECT if I do not cooperate with these people. So if I didn't cooperate, they were going to go for broke, and I had to go for broke, or I was going down no matter what. So when I'm in there, they plead no contest, and I'm like, wait a minute, I contest this. And all of a sudden, the other side that was for Sanford, all of a sudden they kind of got wild up and started taking all these notes. And my lawyer yields the floor to me and say, okay, go ahead, say what you have to say. And I'm just like, since when did we become Nazi Germany, where all of a sudden this is decided, where all of a sudden I'm held before these secret courts, and I'm not allowed evidence, I'm not allowed witnesses, I'm not allowed anything? Where my medical records? Why don't I get these things? And the judge, I believe her name was Benson, was actually quite congenial. She goes, oh, well, we'll give you some time. I go, I need some time to pull this together. And she goes, okay, well, she gave me 2 more weeks. And then she said, your lawyer will get your medical records, and you will be allowed to call what witnesses you want. And I'm like, cool.
So how did it all come to the point of the hearing, though? At what point did the hearing come into play? And how did you get a lawyer? Was this a private lawyer or a public defender, or how did that happen?
Through the public defender's office. They decided who my lawyer was. I got teamed up with this guy called David Philippi. He was out of Otter Tail County, and I ended up talking to a social worker later on that he said, Philippi, oh my word, everybody complains about that guy. He doesn't do anything for you and never returns phone calls, and you can never talk to him. And you talk to him 5 minutes before the hearing, and then all of a sudden you end up going to being committed. He goes, more people complain about him than anybody else. It's like, lovely.
Seriously?
So I'm trying to get a hold of my friend Larry that I told you about, that I felt part of Larry's death, I think part of it is what initiated me in this program, how all of a sudden I got sick and all this very other stuff to get me in the hospital. But that's another story if we want to go into that next time.
Well, maybe just give a brief background as to, who Larry was or how that happened, or...
Larry Leventhal was a lawyer friend of mine who rented a area in the same law office as my father. My father owned this house in St. Paul, which turned into a business. It was this old Victorian home, block off of Summit Avenue in St. Paul. It's kind of like the older area, and he rented the about the bottom floor and a half. And he had been there, I don't know, like 15 some years or something. But Larry was primarily a tribal attorney with the Native American tribes. And one of the times he took me to Spirit Lake Indian Reservation in North Dakota, I was looking for a particular priest for some issues that were going on. And I needed some advice. He was one of the few people I think that I could find that could have some answers. And it turned out that I ran into not specific this priest, but one probably, if not good, perhaps better. Well, anyway, while we're talking to this one well-placed individual in the tribe, he starts having a breakdown, shall we say, kind of like a mental meltdown. And he starts saying, things are going to get real bad, things are going to get real bad. You have no idea how bad they're going to get. And he goes, he was stuttering all over himself. And then he goes, he started talking about the military hired me to work with the foreign forces that are up here. And he goes, they're up here to take over the water supply. And I think this deals with the North Dakota pipeline. And what they were coming in and doing at the same time is CPS was kind of taking over the kids. They wanted supervision of the kids on the tribe. They said, okay, now there's a huge amount of pedophilia, we say, on this tribe. It's worst sexual offense in the nation, so we have to come over and supervise the kids. And they said, oh, this is false. You're making up all these lies. And so they're coming in and taking our kids. And then they were giving FEMAs all over the place. Planes, helicopters, they've got trucks all over the place, everything FEMA. It's astonishing. This place is in between, it's up, the mouth of it is Camp Grafton. Mm-hmm. It's kind of in between Minot Military Base and Grand Forks. Mm-hmm. And so the government...
Oh, I think we've lost audio. Hold on. I think... Okay, it's come back. It's come back. We missed a line or two because your audio went off, Kim.
Imagine that.
I know, just when you were telling us the most important thing about FEMA camps and helicopters and planes. Goodness, why would it go off, right?
Then the government came in and gave them money to expand their prisons. And then there's this old camp in there. I can't remember the name of it. I think it might be Prescott or something. I can't remember the name of it. But they surrounded it with barbed wire, and they pointed the top inward. And then they added like this huge garage thing on the back, and I'm watching them build this thing, and on the top is just this massive ventilation.
You've gone off again. No audio. Oh dear. Let me see if I can send... Oh, you've come back. Okay, you're back.
Okay, we're at massive ventilation system.
This is amazing. I should tell people that, even when we were talking informally yesterday, this was kind of happening. So we know that Kim has a lot of very important information to disclose to the nation. Can't hear you. Okay, your audio is sort of blinking on and off, which is simply not acceptable. So perhaps these guys who are doing this need to stop doing that.
Okay, so what he said...
I heard the first part of that.
Okay, what he said is he was working with foreign troops to take over the water supply. Our government hired him to work with foreign troops. He said these foreign troops...
Didn't hear the end of that statement. These foreign troops...
These foreign troops...
Okay, no audio again. Let's just wait 1 second. Unbelievable that this is happening. Okay, now I can hear you. Yeah.
He said there were 600,000 of them up there. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, but literally we're losing words.
Okay, so there were 600,000 of them up there. They're taking the...
Okay. They're literally playing with the audio. This is absolutely unbelievable how infantile they are. I can't hear you.
My microphone thing keeps on going off all by itself, like every other word.
That's what I'm noticing from over here. So yeah, and then it says over here to me, it says it's self-muted, as if you had muted it.
No. And keep hitting it to try to keep it open. So anyway, I think that's kind of what initiated me onto this thing. As I almost died downstairs, and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't walk, and all the other stuff in my house, and before I had to go to the doctor, I didn't realize...
Okay.
While this is going on with me, my friend Larry had died.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I didn't even know about it. So we were being basically...
your microphone is being messed with again.
Imagine that. I keep watching it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I told you, if anything happens to me, it was Sanford. They're the ones who stuffed these chips in me and everything else. Because since I got out of there, I mean, the buzzing in my ears, the...
Yeah, so they've muted you as you were just speaking. Okay. Yeah, we heard the buzzing in your ears and then you were muted again.
They put these things in them. I can feel them in specific places. And I even felt where they injected me. There's like this rice-sized piece of thing in my arm. And the story gets really wild with the hospital. But this thing with Larry is kind of what I think initiated me, getting me in the hospital.
Right, because obviously he was telling you information of so explosive a nature that they were trying to keep secret, even though they were doing some pretty visible operations out there, right? I mean, building camps and barbed wire and all that.
They were doing some bizarre stuff. And expanding the prison. Don't forget that.
Expanding the prison.
Yeah. The generosity of our government just doesn't stop at the natives, do they?
No, they'd like to put all of us in there, probably. So
I wanted to ask, did they give you any blankets with that deal? Oh, my word. Okay, so anyway, I'm in there and I'm being floored. So I ran into this one priest anyway. And I hear this story and it just blows me away. So later on, to finish off the story, the remarkable part of the story is, later on I ended up in Fargo where this priest was that I met near, shall we say, he was by that reservation. And I get up to him and I go, Father, I had to tell you this incredible story. And I basically told him the story I just told you. And he goes, who told you the story? And I go, no offense, Father, I'd really rather not say. And he goes, I was just wondering if it was the same person who told me that story. He had already heard the story. He had already heard the story. My story wasn't weird to him. I almost wish I would have told him who it was, because I know he would have never told it. But it's and it clearly it wasn't confession.
Do you think it was someone else who told him, or your own friend?
It had to be, because I knew this guy would have nothing to do with the Catholic religion. I knew it. He didn't trust Mel, and I don't blame him with a lot of things that happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
This was a really stand-up guy for a priest, and I don't know who told him, but I'm thinking it may have been somebody else. But the story is quite sensational. But then later on, you see what happened with the North Dakota pipeline, and then you understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. My friend Larry at the time, who was Jewish, was having issues hearing this. So all of a sudden, he's hearing the story, and immediately you see him almost go catatonic. All of a sudden, he sits up straight in his chair, and his eyes get as big as saucers, and it's just like he just freezes. He just can't quite deal with it. And so it's kind of like you're watching almost trauma-based mind control happen on him, where it's just too much for him to take. We're thinking that there's genocide.
Which person are you speaking about? The person who told you this, Larry? The witness?
Larry was the one who was there with me hearing that story.
Yeah.
But it's different when you actually have family members who died under nasty situations in Germany hearing that versus someone who heard the story of what happened in Germany. It's completely different of the psychological ramifications of hearing that story. So we're hearing something else I can handle a little better than he can. So all of a sudden, as time goes on, and I'm telling him these crazy stories, and he just can't believe things with FEMA camps and things like that, and he's falling apart. It's just like, no, can't be. We got rid of Bush, but we got Obama now. We got Obama. I go, yeah, we do. Why is Gitmo still open? Why do we have more troops in Iraq and Afghanistan? No longer labeled troops, labeled support troops. We got more guys over there than we ever had before. All of a sudden, he just took our troops and labeled them support troops, and all of a sudden everything's good. How's that? And he just couldn't answer it. And I think toward the end, things were starting to make sense to him. And he would have been one of the true lawyers that really worked for the tribe that probably could have slowed this down. I don't think he could have stopped it, but I do think he could have slowed it down. And he was the one who came up with this just unusual cancer, pancreatic cancer out of nowhere, and it suddenly just took him down, and he died. I mean, it was a very aggressive cancer. And so I'm thinking like Dr. Mary's monkey cancer. I don't think that was a natural cancer. I think they had to take him out. And if you want to look into that, that is a real thing. The government can give you cancer with these direct energy weapons. They can do it in all kinds of ways. They can give you some sort of fungus.
Yes, I think I'm aware of that too, from everything my research points to. Yes, these directed energy weapons can give you instant cancers and fast-acting cancers.
Yeah, so as this is going on, my dad is helping him out and saying, okay, now that you're dying of cancer, and he shows up on his deathbed, and my father hands him eviction notices at the same time. So now you got to get out while you're dying of cancer, pancreatic cancer in the hospital, get out. So now he's adding more stress and situations on the problem. So it's like my father was kind of like pivotal in like taking Larry down at the same time and adding more stress. And my father was pivotal in the same way that it was kind of happening with me. And then I'm kind of remembering in the past where he was talking about his Freemasonic friends.
Oh, wow. So your father had Masonic connections?
Well, he didn't say that he was a Mason. He just said he had Mason friends.
Okay.
He doesn't really come out and say things directly. My father never does. And so when I found out he was saying all these lies about me to put me away also, it later worked out to my benefit, actually. So this is the background of how that ended up with there. And I suppose I should add the background of where the stuff that my cousin explained to me, where all of a sudden I'm saying there's people underground with intentions of harming us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was another story that I had, and this dealt with people that I knew in Fargo. And this one woman knows the priest that took me to this priest that told me about, yeah, I heard that story. I don't want to explain names here because
sure.
People probably won't even talk to me anyway after I repeat this story. Let's see how often the microphone goes off.
Yeah, well, anybody you wish to protect, certainly you do not want to say their names. Yeah.
This family supposedly has very high Masonic ties.
Okay.
And they try, the family goes right down the center, good and bad. I'll just put it that way. Supposedly one of the family members is a satanic priest, and another is a high-level Luciferian, and the family claims that he works for the rogue government, is what they say.
Ah.
And whatever that means.
Interesting. Well, we do have a rogue government.
Those are the words that they use.
Interesting.
Rogue government.
Yeah.
I think this is RX 86 or 84, whatever it was. And so the story that suddenly came out, this one sister went a little off rails. She was the one who was trying to steal the house from the good sister, shall we say, that's rather religious and just, very caring individual. And the other side is trying to steal the house, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she suddenly decides to change her mind and claims that people are following her. She thinks everybody's working for the government now. People are walking around holding cell phones up to her, and she says that under Fargo, there's an actual city, and they have 900 full-time satanic priests. Now, that's a very unusual story when you think of it. If you're going to think, well, if you're a satanic priest, is it full or part-time?
Really?
That isn't the wording that you're thinking of.
Full-time.
I heard Tom LaVey, working as a satanic priest and all that, and he also worked at the San Francisco Police Department. Is it full or part-time? Is there a day job involved? It's just, it's just a weird story on its face.
Yes.
And so that was one of the stories that I repeated to my cousins. Like, I know somebody in this town, they have a strange story, and then look at the reaction I got.
So she attributed that story to you, and she said it was a belief system, that's something you believed, etc., etc.
That there's people underground with intention of harming us. Supposedly the people who run this underground city under Fargo are Masons. That's the part of the story.
Interesting.
Whether she's involved with that underground group or what, but when you look at these satanic societies, what's always in them? Well, Son of Sam said, you think we're the dregs of society. No, we're the elite. We're your doctors, we're your lawyers, we're your politicians, we're the cream of society. We aren't the dregs of society. From what I've kind of come to understand in the study of this is, and running into families with this, is the Luciferians kind of think of themselves as the elite, and the Satanists are more or less the knuckle draggers on the whole thing. They're just kind of like the cheap staff.
I didn't know that they made distinctions among themselves, the Luciferians and the Satanists. I thought they were all the same thing.
Nope, they consider them simply different. They consider Lucifer and Satan different. Most of us don't consider them to be on different levels, but they consider them to be separate entities.
I see.
Believe it or not.
And there's different sects, apparently. Some of them are Satanists and some of them are Luciferians.
Yeah, but a lot of times they work together. So this was, I don't know if we can get much weirder than this in the story. But when I got out, the story got weirder, believe it or not. So when I was released, the story got much weirder. When I got released and they found out I got released, my friend about fell over when she saw me. She goes, "Oh, I was so worried about you." She goes, "I just found out my friend, he got very sick, and they said the doctors made a horrible mistake, and they're not sure if he's going to live. He's in Sanford right now." Well, it turned around. He ended up dying under the mistakes that they made, and then they list his cause of death as natural. So some guy by the name of Alan, who died last summer, died due to the mistakes of the doctors in that hospital, and they listed as natural causes. So they don't have any problems with doing some of this stuff. Apparently, as we talked before, Ole Drummond, Damgard, that's it. He did that thing on Martin Luther King about how it was involved, how they finally killed him. It was the police, the fire department, and the medical staff that killed him. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, what was his name, Earl something? I forget the guy's name. What was it? The family of Martin Luther King Jr. tried to get him off. So
I see.
We have the same actors, and it's all Masonic all the way. And it seemed like it was that way when I was in the hospital. So meanwhile, back at the ranch, okay, I'm in hospital number 3 now.
Yeah.
I'm at Sanford South, and so now I just got the marching orders that I'm going to be allowed my medical records, and I'm going to be allowed to call witnesses. Meanwhile, it's still hard to use the phone and occasionally I'm able to get a phone call out, depending on who I get it through. And sometimes I'll get a phone call from a friend, and it's like, oh, thank God you called. I've been trying to get a hold of you. You finally got my message. And they're just like, what message? I never get a message from you. I'm just calling to see how you're doing. It's like, so, they're blocking the phone calls.
They were blocking phone calls, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get a hold of a lawyer. I'm trying to get a hold of Larry's paralegal so she can try to get a hold of me, a lawyer. So finally, when I get a hold of her, she is able to tell me a number of things of what are going on. She goes, okay, first, your lawyer is not your lawyer. She goes, they own your lawyer. Get used to it. Be careful what you say on the phone. Everything's recorded. So it's like, okay, they're recording everything. Can I throw anything in there to screw everything up?
Okay. Good thinking.
Yeah, well, what can I say to point them in the wrong direction? Okay, now I know this. Thank you. It helps to work out in your benefit.
You can use it to your advantage, exactly.
Yeah, they're doing everything they can to keep me from my records. So now I can prove they actually have these allergies, and they almost killed me a number of times, saying that I'm delusional, because now they're still going for eating disorder. They're saying non-specified psychosis. So if I can get my medical records and show that I actually had a reaction to these stuff, these sugars and various other stuff, that can prove it. Meanwhile, I can't get my records. No matter everywhere I call and try to get, I can't get a hold of them. And I can't get a hold of a lawyer. And it's just this huge runaround game. And I'm having a horrible difficulty. And then all of a sudden I call the records office, and they're just like, yeah, sure, we can fax them to you, no problem. And then this one nurse refuses to allow me to use the fax. Her name's Natasha Rutherford. And it turns out, I found out later, that she was ordered by Dr. Jorgensen, my doctor, not to allow me in any way to send anything for me to get my medical records, or to receive anything giving my medical records. And if I asked to see Dr. Jorgensen or talk to her or anything, because things always go wrong for me on the floor, she would stop me and, kind of like walk with you like this to try to prevent you from going anywhere, and saying, you're not allowed to call her in any way. And I go, why am I not allowed to call her? And she goes, because it would be inappropriate. She goes, she's not here today anyway. And like 3 minutes later, I watched the doctor traipse across the lunchroom floor. I'm like, really? So they're
That's
constantly
amazing.
lying to me. They're lying. I found out they lied about my weight charts too. They were manipulating the numbers on there to make it look like I was faking on certain things. They're throwing meat in my food, saying that, oh, it's due to my delusional belief system that I won't eat. It's all by choice. She's just being difficult. And then finally, I just had enough. The third time I got bacon in my eggs, I got this one guy, Derek, and he's just like, he'd show up and he's like, oh, what do you want? Do you feel like killing yourself today? That was another thing that they were doing to me every day. It's like, you're suicidal, aren't you? You're really suicidal.
Oh, this is hysterical.
You're having great anxiety, aren't you? And I'm like, no, I'm just angry about the situation. I want my medical records. Just like, oh, no, you're suicidal. We can tell you have great anxiety. You really should take these drugs. And it's like, no, I'm angry. Give me my medical records.
So this guy was what, a psychiatric nurse?
Yeah, this is a psychiatric nurse. And so finally I go and I just like, okay, do you have a belief system? He goes, my belief system doesn't matter. And I go, okay, my belief system is I stay away from meat. It's part of my faith. I'm not eating this stuff. I mean, what if I was a Muslim or a Hindu? He goes, oh, don't exaggerate. Kind of like my faith wasn't on the level of a Hindu or a Muslim. And it's like, okay, now I've had enough. And then so I'm trying to think in my mind, okay, I'm being emotional right now. I'm about to have a reaction. Think about something who is smarter than you that would know how to deal with this. So I immediately think of my stepfather with 2 psychology degrees. How would he handle this? And he'd go through the chain of command and thinking, okay, there's got to be some complaint department in the hospital.
Good thinking.
I find out there's patient relations, and I call, I would like to see where it is written how it's okay to discriminate against Christians. I want to see where that is in writing.
Brilliant.
You show me that. And I go into my story about how I'm constantly persecuted for my faith, where all of a sudden they think I'm delusional and I'm crazy because I pray and it's a problem, and they talk about me being religious is an issue, and praying is like a mental illness, and the fact that food is, or meat is in my food is part of a delusional belief system of behavior. Not only would I like to see that in the DMS-5, but I would also like to see that in your own Sanford pamphlets. Where is it where you say, we discriminate against all faiths? I want to see that in writing. And all of a sudden the guy has a meltdown on the other line. Just like, oh my word, let me call the person in charge of the third floor. And I had the most perfect food for like 2 days.
That's fabulous. That's brilliant that you did that. My goodness. Literally that is, a kind of a lesson to anybody who is stuck in a situation like that and is being treated so poorly. To literally demand to see, the patient rights mediator or whoever it is in charge in the hospital, or to ask for their booklet of policies where it states it's okay to discriminate against somebody who has food allergies or who has food preferences and prefers to be vegetarian.
Oh, yeah. So, needless to say, they never gave me anything with Sanford policies. Never handed me anything up.
Because, of course, there wasn't any, right? There wasn't any written policy to that extent, yeah.
So then there probably was, but they didn't want me to have a copy on it. So
You think there was? You think there was actually a policy to that effect?
So anyway, they brought up the dietitian for the second time, where I went through all this stuff and I had to repeat the same stuff of all my allergies again. And so they have me also pressured in adding more foods. And I'm just like, no, I have reactions to stuff. And they're just like, they go nuts for just like, you got to have something else. This is part of your delusional belief system and how you have poor self-care. So it's like, okay, well, I'm looking at this and being a vegetarian and gluten allergies, and I'm looking at the list of things that I can eat. And it's like, okay, I haven't had a potato in like 10 or 11 months. I don't think I had a reaction to that. So I have it, and many hours later, all of a sudden, I'm lying in bed. I feel myself start to itch like crazy. I get up, there's red blotches all over my arms, all over my chest, all over my legs. It starts going through my throat. I feel like my throat is closing down. I go up to the nurse's station and say, okay, I'm having a reaction here. So this is like, this is now the 5th one I've had in the hospital. But this is all psychosis because I don't have food allergies. I have an eating disorder at this point in time.
Unbelievable.
So they send up the panic squad up there. They call it the panic squad, I believe it was.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, because you're not allowed medical treatment when you're in the mental ward. So they had never been allowed on that unit before, so they had difficulty finding it.
That's amazing. You're not allowed medical treatment while you're in the psychiatric ward. That in itself, is pretty dramatic information right there.
No, we are not a medical facility. We're a psychiatric facility is what they said. And what they told my friend when they brought me over here, oh, don't worry, we'll continue her medical treatment. And they didn't. So my eyes were so bad, I couldn't see anything. They're handing me paperwork, asking me to sign things, and I won't sign a thing while I'm there because I can't read it. Because my eyes went ever since I was in there. So after that little treatment, they went crazy the next day. All of a sudden, they're going to have to reevaluate my psychiatric diagnosis.
Excellent.
There were a flurry in that place. And all of a sudden, they wanted to know everything about my problems with food and all that. And they were nice for a couple days. Where am I? It's like.
But they still kept you there.
Oh yeah. So anyway, I definitely wasn't going to get my medical records after that because they didn't want it in writing that some of the problems I actually had were legitimate. But I finally found a way around it, and that I was able to get a phone call to my friend, and I go, okay, there's a thing where I have this release form. I sent the release form to him, allowing it, and I signed it, and I got it to him. I go, will you go over to Perm, which is like about 10 miles from him, and get my first records and show that I have these reactions? And so I talked to him, and okay, he's going to go over and do it. And I talked to him. I talked to the woman on there. I go, so is it okay to fax this over there? And she's just like, oh, yeah, no problem. They can use the fax. And I talked to her and said they should be allowed to use the fax. But I'm missing one thing before this. Right after my little reaction, and I'm having trouble getting my medical records for so long. This woman, Ashley, comes in with this nurse, Kevin, and tells us that their legal department has advised them. I want to use the exact words she used. This is at 10:10 on 4/17/17. Ashley said, "We are not allowed to let you build a case against us." The legal department advised us.
How does that work?
Well, that's why I wasn't going to be allowed my medical records, she told me. And then when I got the medical records, she said, "I told you that we're not obliged to help you." So I talked to the woman at Perm at the records office. She said, "Oh, yeah, sure, that's a business purpose. They have to send that through there." And I'm like, "Oh, great." So Don goes up there and stands at the actual records office in Perm, and they're waiting for it. And Perm calls them to send it to them. And I gave them the release form that they had to fax to them. And all of a sudden, there's a flurry. The doctor's back there, the nurse is on there, they're talking to the phone. It's like people are going nuts in the back of me doing that. And I go, "I'm waiting for it." And Don calls and he's talking to me. I can get phone calls in, but it's difficult for me to phone out. So he's talking to me, "What's going on? It's taking forever." And even the woman back there, she says, "I don't understand what's going on. Why can't they just send the fax?" And they're talking with their legal department, doing everything not to send it. And finally, they have to send it.
Absolutely. Everybody has a right to get their medical records. I mean, it's absolutely absurd that they would even attempt to withhold them from you.
Not me. I'm not allowed to get my medical records, according to their legal department. So the legal department is in collusion to try and keep people from there. Okay, so he walks over and he brings me my medical records the next day, and everybody's freaking out. And I got a 2-week extension. Now I'm working on the medical records for there. And I had now gotten a hold of Sherry, the paralegal that was Larry, and she's helping me work through this and trying to get through various family members. And I found out through my cousin Claudette, who was a good friend of Marlene, who got me in there, and she told me that, "Oh, you know, she had a mental breakdown. She was hospitalized for 3 months. She's currently on disability for mental illness, and she's under a whole bunch of meds." I'm like, "Really? How interesting. Would you be willing to say that in court?"
Brilliant question. Mm-hmm.
And then I find out that my uncle had died, and nobody told me. This is my dad's brother.
Oh, no.
So my dad didn't tell me about Larry, and my uncle had died years before. Now, you being a targeted individual, you know that you're basically a walking, talking piece of surveillance equipment. And wherever you go causes problems to other people. And I actually had friends ask me not to show up anymore because they felt that when I showed up, they started getting followed. And everywhere that I showed up, they always got followed. And they would point out these people were following us. Didn't bother me. I didn't notice it. But you know what? All these people around me say, "You're being followed and I don't like it. Please stay away." Oop.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, it's horrifying, but it's actually the reality of what's going on in America today and in various other countries. It's horrifying because it's the destruction of your friendships, the destruction of your social circle.
But you don't want to cause trouble to other people, so it's the reason you drop out of a lot of things, because you're going to cause problems to other people around you. Mm-hmm. And I'm convinced that my friend Larry was murdered. I had a cousin, David, who worked with Russian ciphers, that he was a natural doctor, too. He's a chiropractor. The things that he described with how his heart went, I didn't understand directed energy weapons entirely at the time, and I think they took him out. So I'm looking at the stuff, and it's horrifying. So you're trying to keep your distance so you don't cause harm or problems to other people. So
yeah.
I hadn't gotten out of my way to talk to a lot of people deliberately for a long time because they're worried about their safety. So I had found out this uncle had died years before, so I wanted to call my aunt to say, "You know, I'm sorry, I didn't know he died, you know, I've been kind of out of it, I just wanted to make an apology." And she goes, "You know what your father did? Now keep in mind, he's a tax attorney. One time he let it slip that he made over $1,000 an hour. So he's a tax attorney, and his brother, my uncle, was the executor of my grandmother's estate." She goes, "He told us all the taxes were paid on this thing. And he stuck us with $29,000 of having to pay his half. Now, he's worth multi-millions, and they are not. And he stuck them with the whole bill. And so I'm finding about, and then he did this and X, Y, Z. He's going in all these horrible things that he had done. And like, really? So it immediately, if you know a lot of, it's very typical of my father. He's a very narcissistic person. If he doesn't like you, he will screw you over in every way possible, imagine, and then some. So it's like, okay. So part of this is being based on him trying to get me put away so it doesn't make him look bad. And I'm finding out he's doing it to other people. So if everybody's not talking, nobody's really knowing what he's doing. So this is also part of what he'd like me not to know, to stay away from the family. So I get this, and I find out, so here's another person that can be a character witness of kind of the behavior of what he does too, and the behavior of Marlene. So they're both a little off balance. They both have Masonic ties. I'm finding out a lot of the hospital people do. And so things are looking up. So I'm just like, hey, I go to the main psychiatrist and I'm like, you know, how is it you can put me in here on a person that I've never met before? And she hasn't, I didn't even meet her for 3 hours total the whole time she came and visited me in the hospital. I find out that she's mentally ill. She's on disability for mental illness. She's under medication, and she was hospitalized for 3 months for this. And I go, how is this possible? And he goes, well, that doesn't matter. Even your neighbor can turn you in. The words turn you in were actually used.
You know, that's actually extraordinary. You told me this earlier, and I could barely believe it. Did you say this guy was the chief psychiatrist in this hospital?
He was the chief psychiatrist. He was in charge of that area. Yep.
And in charge of that ward. This is the North Dakota hospital.
Yep, this is Sanford, North Dakota, Fargo, North Dakota, the South Unit. So, and just like, okay, that's interesting. And the guy's claiming that, you know, oh, well, I'm Catholic, I'm this nice guy, you know, I go to church and all this other stuff. And I'm finding out he's lying and altering other people's medical records. The same thing is essentially happening to the guy right next to me. They're altering his diagnosis every way from Sunday. He gets like, you know, 5 or 6 different diagnoses. They change it for every hour practically. And then Bird actually altered the dates on his medical records so he could hold him there.
And Bird is the chief psychiatrist.
Yep. And I'm finding out this other guy, this is becoming a standard. I'm checking out with all the other people that are on that unit.
This is absolutely the most extraordinary piece of your testimony that you shared with me earlier, so I do want to spend some time on it. Your actual time in the psychiatry ward and actually what you discovered over there. This very statement actually that this guy made to you, you know, so anyone could turn you in. So that sort of seems to suggest that a psychiatry ward is not just a mental health unit or anything connected with health. It's more of a jail or a prison system. Something that you could be turned into.
Not only that, while I was there, they changed the doors and they changed the windows. Apparently they made it like bulletproof windows, and they put these, I'm watching the guys install this metal rod on all the doors, and they have to cut part of the bottom of the door off, and incredibly noisy in there, just crazy noisy. And then I'm asking one of the guys who's doing it, and I'm just like, you know, because I like to go straight to the source, and I'm like, you know, what are you doing there? And he goes, oh, we're just adding the system on here. This is going to be really great. They're going to be able to lock down the doors from the nurses' station now. And like, really? Wow, that's quite interesting. Thank you. So later I'm not mentioning this to nurses or anything, because, you know, I'm talking this to other people that are there. And they're kind of like a little crazy in it. But the one that it made the big difference on, this is the big story in there. This one guy that was in there, I go, you know, he's a former military guy. He was in Afghanistan. He was in there. I'm finding that they're telling a lot of people that they will help them medically in there, and they aren't. He's having liver issues, and they aren't helping him in any way. He's still having these problems, and they're holding him there. There's something wrong with it. And turns out this other doctor comes in who knows him and says, you're one of the most stable people I know. What the hell are you doing in here? And he goes, well, they're supposed to be checking my liver levels, and I'm having all these pains and everything, and I don't know what's going on. They won't give me these tests. And he goes, hey, I'll take care of it. I'll get you these tests. And no matter what that doctor tried to do, he couldn't get the tests.
Oh no, he was being prevented.
Yep. So I'm talking to this one patient. I don't want to even give it an initial who this guy was. We'll just call him the military guy, former military guy. And so I'm talking to him, and I asked him about various things. And from the areas he was in, he knew something about Croatia. And I remember watching these things on Exposing DynCorp. And remembering that Cynthia McKinney where she's tearing apart Rumsfeld.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking him, I heard this thing about this movie, The Whistleblower, how we were trafficking in kids in Croatia, former Yugoslavia, Croatia, Serbia, all that place. And I go, was that true? Do you know anything about it? And he goes, oh yeah, that was going on big time. Yeah, I'm very well aware of that. That was real. He goes, it was pretty much Muslim and NATO. And I'm like, whoa. So you were there on the ground and you saw that and that was real. He goes, yeah, I was there. I can tell you it's true. Yeah. I'm like, whoa. And I go, there's another thing I'm kind of curious on. I saw this thing years ago. It was an article from Seymour Hersh. It was showing about like this huge trench that was dug out, and it looked like people were piled in it. And it said that we were committing genocide in Afghanistan during the what was it, Bush 1. And I go, all of a sudden out of nowhere, I can't find that on a search engine anywhere. It disappeared, like it doesn't exist. And he goes, I can tell you right now, we were rounding up entire villages, entire towns, taking men, women, and children, digging a ditch, and we were killing them. And I saw it with my own eyes. And I'm like, why didn't you do something to stop it? And he goes, if I had done anything, if I even said anything, there would have been a bullet in my head and I would have been down in there with him. I'm like, whoa.
Incredible story. Wow.
And then I told you, well, if I tell the story to anybody, all they're going to do is just say I'm crazy. And so I'm just like, my friend came in, and this is part of the story I was talking about with the doors. And I go, okay. He's telling me all this, and he goes, I can tell you right now what I know of at this time. And this is last April when this was set. So I can tell you right now, there are 8 fully operational FEMA camps in this country right now.
Operational? Now. What does operational mean?
I mean, people are being processed through them. They're going to be just like what he was doing there in Afghanistan. He said they're fully operational. And that was last April. These homeless are not missing for no reason.
The homeless that are missing in different cities around the country, is that?
And not just the homeless. Over 1 million people go disappearing. All of a sudden they're going to work, and all of a sudden they're gone.
Who are you talking about? Now, you had mentioned earlier that...
David Pilates or something like that, missing 411. You look at the people that go missing in this country, it's over 1 million a year. That's what's reported. If you go into the homeless, nobody notices really them missing at all. So it could be much higher.
And you mentioned immigrants, right? You mentioned the children who came into this country. There were thousands of them. I think there were such huge numbers at one point reported.
Detention center down in the Southwest, and the congressman tried to go in and see him, and it said, we're not going to let you see them. Nobody knows what happened to them. All of a sudden they disappeared. Where'd they go to? There's a detention center. Where'd they go to?
Well, this is a very interesting topic and something that must be researched further, just because of what the nature of this subject and the nature of the revelations that are coming out in old media these days about child trafficking and child abuse and literally abduction of children.
It's not just children. These are adults. People are missing all over the place, and nobody's really paying attention to it. And this guy said that there were 8 fully operational camps, in his exact words, that he knew of. Now, some of these places, as I told you, you have to look into that movie. After I went, my eyes were open when I was in Germany. There's that movie, Age of Fear, Psychiatry's Reign of Terror. It's a free documentary. You can see it on YouTube.
Okay.
It talks about how this has been going on, since the late 1800s, where they were eliminating people through the hospitals and through the insane asylums. That's what the crematoria were. I mean, Hitler was the ideal of some of these doctors. The camps were run by psychiatrists. If you look into the T4, Mengele was a doctor. Some of these some of these, like the twin studies, that was for studying on cloning and various other things. All these things were supposedly some of the worst things that were done at Dachau are what were taken out with their technology or what's being used on us. I believe it was Dr. Hall who was mentioning that. There's some wild stuff going on that these people are telling me. I met one guy who claimed that he worked in 3 of these underground, he said they were cities. He called them cities. It said he was, and it's not, he wasn't far from here. He said it was in Michigan, Denver, and Florida were the underground cities that he lived in.
Michigan, Denver, and Florida. Where?
Those were the ones.
Do you know where in Michigan?
Didn't say.
Or in Florida? Didn't say.
When I was in Florida, I go, by then I had heard that there was one under Disney and one under NASA, and I go, which one? Well, from what I understand, there's a lot more now. And he goes, I don't remember. And then the weird thing is the question that you always have to ask, the alien question, you go, all these conspiracy theories, bring them up. I go, yeah, you see any aliens? And you're laughing as you say it. And he goes, I don't remember. I'm like, oh, okay. That was the only thing they get. And then all of a sudden he started talking about how there were some farmers in the area and they were all seeing aliens. And it's just like there were a whole bunch of people, they witnessed them. And he's talking about alien experiences that were happening in the area. And I'm like, okay, what is the clearance level that you have to work in those cities? I know that you're mentally tested in some way for your psychological evaluation before you get those jobs. But that's all I ever heard, and I can't expand more on it. But I thought that was very.
That's extraordinary. Just this information that you've, disclosed over here. I think there are many researchers who would be very interested in it. I mean, there are some old media journalists who are kind of covering this a little bit more, like George Webb or Dave Hodges of the Common Sense Show. You may want to just sort of let them have this information, or send them the link to this podcast.
I don't know, but it's what's going on right now is he said was very bad. So we're walking around there and playing it, and I start looking at the doors and pointing the doors to this military guy in the hospital. And I'm just like, no. I talked to the guys that are installing these things on the doors, and they say now they can lock down the doors to the nurses station. And then I go to the nurses and I ask them, what are these for? And they go, well, if anyone commits suicide, tries to, hang a towel on the door or something, we can tell by the weight whether or not they're doing something. So there's 2 different stories. How do you take this? This guy froze, kind of went catatonic, and he goes, this place is a crazy place. This is for crazy people. This is for crazy people. I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. And he started freaking out. And then all of a sudden he goes, I'm here voluntarily, so I can leave anytime I want. And he went up and he demanded to be released right then and there. And they even held him for a few more hours. And he was freaking out the whole time. I'm like, oh my word, I'm not going to have anyone here that can witness what he actually told me. I'm just going to be a crazy person saying this. And so as he's walking out the door and my friend's walking in, I go, and they're passing real quick, and I'm just like, I got to keep concise. I'm like, okay, tell them that we're killing people in Afghanistan. Explain it. We're committing genocide in Afghanistan. Can you tell that you were part of that? Can you tell that to my friend? He goes, yes, we're doing that. We're participating in genocide in Afghanistan. And I'm like, great. And you did say that there were 8 fully operational camps going on right now in this country, right? And he goes, yes, there are. I'm like, thank you. And then I talked to my friend today and I go, will you come out and verify this for me as a witness? He goes, I'm not going to put myself out like that. He goes, yeah, I remember it. But no, I'm not saying anything. It's like, oh my word, I went to all that effort to get a witness, and now all of a sudden they won't come forward. It's like all these people are terrified to come out and actually say this stuff, when if you don't say it, our only strength is in numbers.
Yes, you're right.
Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden he's gone. I thought that was a great piece of information. Then I find out the guy next to me that his records are being altered, and I find out when I get my documents from the court that they lied about what my friend said and take everything out of context. And I show my friend, did you say this to me? Did you say this to them about me?
Your audio's gone again. Okay, it's back. It's back.
I never said any of those things about you. That's lies. I don't even know what these words mean. And I'm like, okay, great. So now I'm thinking I have 3 witnesses that I can work off of. Now all I need is my medical records to find out what I'm being charged with. Because that's how you find out what you're being charged with, is when you find out what they're saying. Meanwhile, they give you this one document of what they submitted to the court, where it's synopsis of everything that went on completely out of context, and you can't find the rest of the documentation to refute it. So I'm still having trouble getting that. And I team up with the guy next door to me. He's in room 354. I'm in 355. And we're basically having family turn us in. And we decided to team up, and he's telling me how Bird, he said, I threatened to sue Bird. I'm going to sue him. He altered all my documents. He's doing everything. He's kind of like this more of a new age guy where everything is peace and love and go with the flow. And, if they have the meetings, yeah, I'll go with it. But, he was having some stressful times in there. And so we decided to team up. And remind me to come to that at the end, because as the story goes on, that it'll make sense.
Okay.
Then I run into this other woman who was there who helped me when, after I got my medical records, all of a sudden I'm the greatest nuisance in ever the world to ask them for me to make a phone call. And I find, because when they take you across state lines, you can't make a phone call when everyone you know is in Minnesota, and now I'm in Fargo. So I may be 70 miles away, but I can't place a phone call out of that place. So I was lucky enough to run into this one woman who had a phone card, and she was willing to help me, and that was the only one of the things that saved me, was my lifeline, was that she gave me a phone card.
That's excellent.
So I was able to call in and start compiling some evidence and getting out. But I still can't get a lawyer, but I was able to find some certain people. And I got a hold of my stepfather, and I'm just like, okay, I don't have a lawyer, and I need some money for a lawyer. And I offered to give him some things, and I go, can I get some money for a lawyer on this if I give you these items? And he's just like, yeah, sure. And he goes, but why do you need me to take custody of guardianship over you? And I'm like, well, my father automatically took it. He has right to, because of biological circumstances, and he's basically lying to me. And he knew all the evil stuff that he had done to my mother. And so he had a lot of dirt on this guy of some of the things that he had done in the past. And also, he could prove that he was lying on the documentation that he presented to him. So he calls my father to see if it's okay. So my father, who formerly worked with the IRS, had a friend who was in charge, I guess, of some area of it. It was the 5-star area of here, who was in charge of the 5-state area, I guess, for the IRS. His friend Gary, and now retired. And then his wife currently works for the IRS, so he's got plenty of connections. My stepfather brings this up to him and goes, if you bring any of this up, I will send the IRS after you, and I will destroy you financially if you help her in any way. And I'm like,
this is so strange, but
I didn't know that, though. I didn't know that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
My stepfather calls back. This guy is a Paris Island Marine. I mean, this guy is no Wilfie Mully. This guy, all of a sudden, was absolutely terrified. He was talking about 1,000,000 miles an hour, and he was having a heart attack and saying, I can't help you at all, da, da, da. And as mid-sentence, he kind of like hangs up on me. He's absolutely terrified. And I'm not used to him being scared in any way, shape, or form. When I got out is when I found that out, because he told Sherry, the paralegal, that's what he had told her. He can't do that because he's going to be destroyed financially by my father. So, to verify the story, should I change the story in any way or die for any purpose, it was Sanford. And everything I say, including the implants, is completely true. Every word I say is true. So if anyone dies around me, if anyone gets hit by the IRS, no one's suicidal. I just want to state that for the record. Because when I left, the brakes went on the car that I was in.
And this was as soon as you walked out of the hospital, you'd gotten your medical records, and you walked into the parking lot, and you started your car.
I didn't get my records yet.
Oh, you didn't get your records yet?
There's more to the story. So this one woman who gave me the... she had been airlifted in because she tried to commit suicide. and she was quite fragile. And in the very beginning, I was there. I'm walking around, and this one guy there, everybody called him Marty, but he had this name tag that said Martin. Tall, thin guy with dark curly hair. And he's talking rather animatedly, and he's saying, we like to keep people here 5 to 7 days for their insurance, for how much insurance they have. And so apparently her insurance ran out. She even went to the doctor. They're supposed to keep you there if you're harm to yourself or others. She told him, this is Dr. Pogel. She said, I feel suicidal. I feel that I'm still a threat to myself. And he goes, well, if you're going to kill yourself, there's nothing I can do to stop it. And
well, that's nice of him. And they let her go?
Yeah, but they wouldn't let me go. But if you say you're suicidal, oh yeah, they'll let you go.
That's absolutely amazing. Or perhaps it's the difference between somebody who's being targeted and somebody who's not.
Yeah, well, if they think you're going to kill yourself, that's fine. And then the other people I'm running into that are going through divorces, I'm listening to a story with Dr. Hall, and he's talking about how this one guy who told me goes, yeah, I got this card. It was the targeted individual card. I can do this to my wife. If ever she wants to get a divorce, I can pull this out on her, and I can make her look crazy, and they won't have to pay alimony and keep kids. It's like
unbelievable.
A lot of these people that this was happening to were going through divorces. And the question is, were they divorcing Masons? The one guy next to me whose family was going against him, he was saying, you know who this really works out well for? My soon-to-be ex-wife. He had a 5-month-old daughter and a son. He had his own business, and he was. It worked out well where she could kind of get everything, and
no,
screw him up of him not being able to get child custody or any access to the children, and then she could just get everything. It works out really well, and I've seen this work a number of ways. And one woman, her husband was even in the military. And she goes, it was the weirdest thing. All of a sudden, all this bizarre stuff happened to me. All of a sudden, I had this blackout, and they told me I did this, and I did that, and I don't remember it. And then, like, faster than you can say scopolamine, all of a sudden she was in a lockdown ward. And she's telling me these stories very similar to targeted individuals. And then this other gal I meet in there, she talks about how these weird things would start to happen to her, and she's like, she felt like she was being followed. And then she'd go into her car, and it's like somebody went through her glove compartment, and they pulled everything out of her glove compartment and put it in neat lines on the seat next to her. So, you say, someone broke into my car, and they rearranged my glove compartment. That's going to sound crazy.
Really? Something to protest, right?
Well, anyway, I forget what it was, but she found something that proved that people were kind of really after her. Because, people around her were saying, you got to go see a therapist, you got to go see a therapist. And so she started going to see one. And finally she got evidence that this was going on. And so she had nothing to do, and she ended up going to the doctor's office. She was excited about it. She brought the evidence with her, and she was there an hour before the appointment. The doctor found out she was there an hour before the appointment, called the police, and had her taken away to a mental ward.
Oh, no. I know. You told me the story earlier. This is absolutely so shocking. She was an hour early for her appointment, and she was sitting in her car.
No, she wasn't sitting in her car. She was sitting in the office. She went to the office.
Oh, okay.
Like, doesn't have anywhere else to go, so she's going to go and wait there until her appointment. And she goes up and checks in before, and she's there an hour early. And because she's an hour early, supposedly the psychologist felt, I think it's psychologist it was, and I don't know if it's psychologist or psychiatrist, they felt threatened because she was there an hour early. And
where did this happen? Was it the same hospital?
This is what brought her into that hospital. I don't know where that happened.
Okay.
I got to tell you, I don't know the office where that happened. I didn't ask that. I can't tell you that. I can try to get a hold of her, see how far this interview goes, and then see how if they'll come forward. Because I'm finding most people don't want to come forward on this stuff.
Yeah, but you see, this is the kind of incredible medical malpractice that's in operation over here.
They have it working on an industrial scale there. Not that there are some people that could use it, but I'd say a good third to half of the people people in there are targeted individuals, and this is what's happening to. All of a sudden, it's like something happens to them. It's like all of a sudden I just went out and I got taken in here and I don't know what happened. It's like scopolamine. They're describing like an attack of scopolamine. And so all of a sudden I get this record. This one person.
Is that your cat? Is that your cat, Stan?
Yeah. Sorry, I got a number of cats in here. We have feral cat problem up here. I'm not a cat person, but all of a sudden I kind of became.
Oh, well, it looks like your cat really likes you.
Yeah, but this one guy. Okay, so all of a sudden he gets pulled in by the police. He doesn't really remember totally what happened or how it happened, and all of a sudden he finds out all these things were said about him, and he's in shock. He can't believe it. He's just like, oh, he was, I don't want to say too much because it's going to give away who he is. And I don't know if he's going to come forward because I don't want to say it. And I told him I'd help him and I'd take this as far as I could, but I'm not going to call him, and especially not at my phone because I don't want to get him in trouble until I got something going forward, because I promise I try to help him as much as I can, because most of these people, they're not strong enough to fight the stuff. They just immediately cave in. I'm the only one who fought them and actually made it out that I'm aware of. And as far as I know, when I finally got my medical records, I'm the only person that they said ever got them. They said no one else had ever requested medical records.
You're kidding.
Ever.
So this was a practice in that hospital to just not give anybody their medical records because nobody asked for them?
You're discharged. And how you're discharged is you're committed.
Oh.
So this one guy, he gets these papers on why he's being held. You get your help, and it lists why you're in there. And you're watching like almost a grown man cry. He couldn't believe that these things had been said. And he goes, my wife said this, and he's finding out this, and the guy's falling apart. And he goes, they're talking about kids and all this other stuff, and he's having a heart attack. And they said I did this to the police. And then he calls, and then he finds out his wife never said those things. Kind of like how it happened with my friend. And then at the very end, when he finally gets out and he's able to get out, the doctor looks at him and he confronts the doctor on the stuff. He goes, you lied about this, and you lied about this, and you lied about this. And he goes, yeah, but it was probably better that I did that, so better safe than sorry. So he confessed to his face that he lied to him. All that stuff that he wrote down was completely lied. That was Pogo again. So Pogo, oh yeah, you want to kill yourself, Reed? Yeah, that's okay. The system of these 3 doctors that were in there were just astonishing. This was just standard policy. Let's see. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it's absolutely astonishing that they're sort of blatantly doing this. They're doing this completely openly, in a way.
They're arrogant about it. They're absolutely arrogant, and they feel they have every right to and can. And there was this one I told you about Roland. That's kind of a thing to get into where...
Yeah, we have to keep a watch on the time because, we have to bring the session to a close. It's been pretty long already. So I think what we can do at this point, Kim, is perhaps try to round it up. You had these horrific experiences in the hospital. What's the upshot? Where are you now? What happened? You finally managed to get out of there. Is there still a court case brewing? What's going on?
I wasn't getting my medical records. All of a sudden I called in one time. I'm asking every day. I'm calling patient relations. I'm going like crazy trying to get the stuff. And I call in one time to the records office. I'm talking to a different person every day trying to get to a different angle. And this one woman says, I can't give them to you because there's a physician's hold. I'm like, really? So Dr. Jorgensen's saying, oh yeah, the doctors and nurses, you can have them any time, but yet they're doing everything to block me from getting them, including saying, we were told not to allow you to get them to the legal department, whatever she said exactly when I quoted it. It was just like, okay. I'm trying like crazy. So all of a sudden I have this meeting, and now after I complain about the religious violations, now they have like 3 people in the room to supervise everything, and they're all together on it. I go, I was told that there's a physician's hold, and that's why I'm not allowed to get it. So every time I would catch this woman in a lie, all of a sudden she got catatonic and she'd be staring straight ahead. And so I could tell I affected her, and I waited a few hours. And then I called the records office. They go, oh yeah, you can have those. But at this point in time, there was only like 2-3 days left. But there's something key that happened before that. My cousin Claudette arranged a phone call for them to have. Now I have 3 people in there. This is Michelle Foreman, which is a social worker, Jim, which was that military guy that became my nurse, who had that jacket that said airborne on it, and then Dr. Jorgensen and myself were all in that room. Okay, so we're all in that room, and I'm trying to get a hold of a number of relatives at the time, and I'm not getting any responses. And so the social worker comes up and goes, "Oh yeah, I got the number for Claudette right here." Well, it turns out to be that family member that talked to you in New York that's associated with the publishing industry.
Oh, right.
And some alternative media people. And for some reason, those phone calls were blocked for like 3 days. And I'm like, why didn't I get this message?
Okay, your audio's gone off again. It just blinked off. Maybe it'll come back in a minute like it usually does. There we go, it's back.
Okay, I'm like, why didn't I get these messages? And
it went off again. I'm so sorry. They're doing it again. They're just playing with audio.
So I just got the message this morning. Well,
can you repeat that, Kim? Because the last thing you said, because your microphone's off again. We just have to wait for it to come back, I know. There we go.
This is key to the whole thing. Of course, it's getting cut off.
Yeah.
Okay, so this meeting with the 4 of us in this room. And she said, okay, I just received this message this morning. And,
I couldn't what?
She couldn't have gotten the message to me. This is the first time she's seen me.
Oh, right.
I ended up calling her cousin, which is the one out in New York, which I've been trying to get a hold of, which also has connections with alternative media and various other stuff, which I still, since I've talked to them, I haven't been able to get a hold of them because they've kind of like taken over my phone and my computer. Like I've told you, I had 11 emails and like 3 YouTube accounts in the last month. They keep shutting down everything that I have.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
while I'm in there, Claudette gets on the phone and tells them, all of them, the social worker, Jorgensen, my doctor, and hair doctor, and Nurse Jim, the psychiatric nurse, that Marlene was mentally ill, that she had been hospitalized for 3 months, that she's on disability for mental illness, and she's currently on psychiatric meds. And they all heard that. And the whole time, Jorgensen was trying to do her thing where she tries screaming over you so she doesn't hear it. And but my cousin still got it in, so she knew it. Now, when I left, I found out that I was finally able to get to that cousin because now I had the number that they gave me. Again, I had a new number, called it. I talked to her and she started talking to me, and they go, "Oh yeah, I've been trying for at least 2 days to get a hold of you." I'm like, "Really?" They told me you called just this morning. So when I get the medical records, it says, in the beginning, the first medical record, it shows, oh, she was so upset because, I hadn't given her the phone call. She was very angry at me, and I had just gotten it this morning. And then I got the 5th medical record that they accidentally gave me. All of a sudden, it turned out that she says, oh, Kim didn't want to receive the phone call from her, and even though she had been trying to get a hold of her for numerous days, Kim refused the phone call.
Unbelievable. Such blatant fabrication.
Oh, yeah. So they contradict each other. The medical records, I got 5 copies of them, and they're all completely different. Like one, when I had an allergic reaction, there were blotches all over my skin. The doctor said Kim refused to show her skin the condition of the rash. And then the other nurse that was in there saying, while I was in there, Kim showed all these red blotches that were all over her pores in front of when I was with Dr. Jorgensen and that. So it's like, even there at the same time, you have the nurse saying one thing and you have the doctor saying the other thing. That's why you need those records. But technically, I still don't have the records yet. So Sherry, I still keep trying to call the court saying, how do I get a hold of my lawyer? I'm going everything. I find the prosecutor, or what was it, the public defender's office. I found a person in charge of it, a Ruth Lee, and trying to call her saying, hey, you're in charge of this office. Why can't I get a hold of one of the lawyers in your office? Why doesn't he ever return phone calls? And then I also I'm getting hold of family members and everything, and trying to do some errand work on the outside because I can't make a phone call more than 10 minutes in there. they're running around saying, no, you only get 10-minute phone calls. So what was it?
You were trying to get to the public defender.
So I got a hold of the court office and I said, well, you can't talk to the judge. They go, but you can write a letter. So it happenstance, I had...
Your audio's been knocked off. Your audio's gone. Audio.
Hello?
It's back.
I had to go into the independent assessor where they do an independent request, and I found out when I got my medical records, it said...
Audio's bumped off again.
Okay,
it's back.
Assessor, I had to go and see him. I was able to drop this letter that she helped compose me. This ended up, happenstance, go to the judge.
It went to the judge? Okay, you're gone again. I can't hear you.
Can you hear?
No. Well, now I can. Yeah.
It went to the judge that originally had ordered me to get my medical records and to he was supposed to.
Okay.
This can be done, from what I understand. When I wrote it, this can be done by phone now. You don't have to have people come in there. You can be subpoenaed by phone. They can just phone call you. They can.
I see. Very interesting.
Okay.
So Kim, it looks like we're being messed with again. Okay. Can
So I'm trying to wrap this up in a few minutes.
Yeah.
So anyway, this gets to her.
They're just playing at this point. They're just blinking in and out of the audio. This is absurd. The juvenile behavior that goes on.
She gets a message. She court orders my release. That because at the same time, I had also gotten all my family members, my friend, my cousin Claudette, my aunt Barb. I got my friend Don and myself. We were all calling the prosecuting attorney, or the public defender's office, the woman Ruth Lee in charge of it, saying, why won't you let her have her medical records, and why won't you allow her to call witnesses? And it's
excellent.
Like, whoa, all of a sudden you won for everybody. And all of a sudden I call in and I find out that the judge got the letter. I called the court and it's like, yay, and I go, well, what happened? You tell anything? And she goes, judge didn't say anything. It just handed to your lawyer. I'm like, oh no, it went into the abyss. I'm doomed. It just went into the abyss. The judge is involved with this. I find out that I'm court-ordered released. When I find out my attorney's on the line, he goes, how could you call everyone and tell me I'm the worst attorney ever? So later on, I find out after I get out, I call up, I'm doing research on the public defenders. He is no longer there, but it's still under the same management, and they changed the name of the public defender's office. So now you can't sue the same entity because now we're a different company. So they knew they were in trouble. But when I got my medical records, I found out they had already committed me to ANOCA on paper. And they had also, when I made it to that independent assessor, that Michelle Foreman, she said, you make sure you call that independent assessor and you tell him our opinion on her. Well, then apparently he's not independent, is he? This guy didn't know that, this guy was so educated that he didn't know sugar was in dextrose. That's how medically inept this guy was. So later on, back home at the ranch, I now find out that I'm now released. I get released by court order through that judge. It was on Beltane, May 1st, one of the highest unholy Satanistic days, and exactly at 3 o'clock. And that would happen like a couple hours after I found out I was getting my medical records as well. So I was getting my medical records like 2 days before it was supposed to be held on the 4th, and I find out that they'll give them to me the following morning on the 2nd. So they would have handed me about 500 pages, and I would have had a day to prepare for it. But then I find out on the medical records that they were going to force drug me before the hearing. So I wouldn't have even known what would happen. So it's if I hadn't gotten that letter to the judge, I would have been there drugged with no witnesses, no evidence, and I probably wouldn't even known the event happened.
That is absolutely extraordinary. And you would have been sent off to this place, Anoka, which you said is a particularly harsh mental health facility, right?
Well, as I told you, I ran into a police guy who told me that there's an underground facility in there, that some guy got loose in there, that they felt it was a high danger level underneath the facility.
Wow.
And he was shocked to find out that there was a whole city under Anoka. Anoka is the Halloween capital of the world, and that's where federal cartridge is. And if you find out with, what's her name, Bryce Taylor, I believe it is, she felt she was targeted because she was a member. Her father was, her grandfather, I think, was CEO or president of Federal Cartridge, and that's how she felt that she was taken out. So there's something with that area and these underground facilities. So it's
wow, it's like going down the rabbit hole once more, right? I mean, so much.
And then they tipped me when I was in there, and they sent my blood. I found out they sent my blood sample, and they did all these heart tests that they sent down to Anoka when I hadn't even been committed yet. So if I hadn't even, this is like 2.5, 3 weeks before my hearing, why are they sending, don't HIPAA laws apply to these people? And they said they faxed it to them, and they even talked to people at Anoka. So if they'd already assumed that I had been committed, they must have owned the judge, Peter Irving of Otter Tail County. There's no other explanation how they were so bold and felt that they could do it. They owned the judge. They owned my lawyer. I wasn't allowed to call witnesses. No evidence. No nothing. I'd had secret court, and I would have been drugged. No one have known the better. Had I not been able to get to a few phone calls, people hand me their phone cards. There were a series of miracles, even that it went to the right judge. My friend who was the paralegal, she was surprised that it turned out that way. She goes, "You're one of the few. You're one of the very few." And I found out when I was there, I was probably the only. I'm pretty standard.
This is an extraordinary story. It's almost as if this malpractice and negligence and ineptitude is sort of entrenched systemic practice over there, so which does make one suspect nefarious motivations and reasons. Why on earth would they want to send you to Anoka? Why on earth would they want to drug you? Why on earth would they, not permit you a fair trial? Why would they? There was so much deception all along from the beginning.
Well, there was a lot going on. Obviously, there's more to the story, but I think of some of the things that I ran into and some of the people I knew probably compiled it because, like I told you, my friend Larry was dead and I almost died at the same time. And as I'm leaving the hospital, the brakes go on the car as we're leaving.
Mm-hmm.
It's a number of things. They felt that they already had me. And when I'm looking at the tests that they sent to Anoka, those are the tests that you send for organ harvesting. Those are the tests that are done for organ harvesting, and there is a facility underneath that place.
What do you mean they're the tests for organ harvesting? What do you mean by that?
They did this ultrasound. They can see the size of the chest cavity and various other stuff. If you look at some of the things that I sent you with the links, it's talking about how some people are worth more dead. And then on top of it, they immediately signed me up for Obamacare, and then they charged the state $200,000 for my care. And I tried to call and protest some of this, and the system's set up where you can't do anything to stop it. You can't complain, you can't do anything. I was on the phone call for 2 days complaining with, they tell you to call the district attorney's office, they tell you to call the insurance people, this is fraud. Even though Sanford got stuck, I think it was a few years ago, they ended up overbilling something like $230 million extra to Social Security. They have a history of this. They have a long history of this. I am the standard of care for Sanford, and the worst part of it is these people that were forcibly put on meds and then sent back out. Now all of a sudden, it's like sometimes it affects their job and they're not allowed to hold their job anymore. All of a sudden they find out, one person in particular, they start getting these letters saying, well, now that you're on these medications, you're unfit to be a parent.
Oh, yeah, they're doing it to parents, and yeah. So first they drug them, and then they keep them there, and then they take the children away from them by saying they've been psychiatric patients. Unbelievable what's going on.
Only people that balked so much and fought the system so much is because I didn't have kids. They hold their kids over them, and all of a sudden these people get terrified, and it's like, okay, I'll take these drugs, I'll cooperate with you, and then they take the drugs and cooperate with them, and then they lose their kids.
Yeah, yeah.
It's criminal. And that's one of the reasons, when I came back to, the reason I was doing this and why I had to go forward, we get back to Ed Foreman. I tell him, okay, you have your hearing tomorrow. You call me. And he was supposed to call me. He never called me. I don't know what happened to him. He disappeared.
Oh, this is what you told me earlier. This is so horrifying. He's never called you, but so you're very concerned about him.
Yeah, this is the reason I went forward. A lot of people say a lot of things. I don't know if he felt that, I really didn't mean it and he didn't call me or anything. It's just like, I promise, we were going to be kind of like United Front. We were going to work together, and never heard from him. So I don't know what happened to Edward Foreman. I've been looking on People Search. I've been looking online, trying to find him. I know he had his own business in Mississippi. He graduated from North Dakota High School. He's like in his early mid-30s. I mean, he had like a 5-month-old daughter at the time named Olive. I'm looking at everything I can find on this guy. I'm not really sure how the name is spelled. Is it Foreman? Is there an E in there? Is it one N or is it two N? I didn't get that down. I figured, oh, he's got my number. He's going to call me. And he never did. He just fell through the cracks. But you know what? With all the things were against him, I was like one of his only lifelines. Why didn't he call me? I mean, his family was working against him like mine was.
Oh, no.
But he didn't have the people on his side. His wife would love to have him packed away. Because then all of a sudden it's like things work well with separating things. The divorce works well for her, custody of the kids, you're seeing this stuff happen, and it's like, oh my God. I'm thinking, this is exactly like Dr. John Hall said. Oh, this is kind of like a little card in their hat. What do you do?
Well, I do hope, if he's out there and watching this, that he does get in touch with you. And,
what if worse, something happened to him, like they kept saying, like with me, oh, you're suicidal, you're suicidal, you're suicidal. Then all of a sudden I'm in this asylum, and all of a sudden, whoa, well, we're worried about her. She denied being suicidal, but she committed suicide. And all of a sudden all my organs are taken, and I'm stuck with newspaper, and nobody knows.
This is absolutely horrifying to contemplate these possibilities. I think what you've done today, Kim, is you've come forward and you've actually told us such an extraordinary story, such an engrossing story with so much to it. And all of these other stories of people's experiences around you, everybody else locked up in this asylum with you. And you've kind of given us an insight that most people don't have, because no one's entered these psych wards and understood exactly this is how things are going down over there. So I know that there's a lot more that we can talk about, and you have so much information on Lyme and various other things, nanocrystals, nanotechnology, that I hope that we can come back and do some research together online.
I think that was also part of the key thing. When I talked to that one Eric Swanson, I said I felt that I had Borrelia. And I pointed to him, because the doctor, Dr. Alan McDonald, and I pointed to this. If venom could have spewed from his eyes, it would have. It's just one of the things. Immediately, he looked at me with such anger, he turned on his heel, and I was going to be committed, just amazing that.
And
they have to hide.
And that is a very important aspect. So in the next podcast, perhaps we can go into detail on that, because there's a whole story there, and there's a lot to unearth over there that you have unearthed yourself in your research, right? Yeah. So let's...
There's one thing I'd like to get at the end, though, if it is possible.
Sure.
I'd like to, if some people would be willing to do this for me. Cat.
Yeah.
Sanford has a public relations office.
Okay.
There's the number. Isn't that kind of interesting, a 666 in there?
The 3 6s with a 3 in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody could call that number at the public relations office and ask them how these doctors are allowed to do this to people when they actually have medical problems and throw them in there. What they're doing to people and taking their kids and various other stuff, how they are allowed to do this. If people could send, just make a phone call, and maybe some of this they'll probably at least make the effort to try to hide it a little better.
Now, would you suggest that people call and give them the link to this video so that the doctors could watch it, so that the public relations office could watch it?
That would be lovely. Yeah. Give them a call. See if they'll give you an email and send it to the public relationship as well.
Yeah, I think
another thing that's going about this is what I'm finding is very effective is most of the people who are upset about chipping and implanting are the Christian community saying, oh, I'll never be chipped, it's never going to happen, I'm not going to take it. Oh, really? Well, when I was put under, and even when I wasn't, when they just took a blood sample, all of a sudden they injected me and I had no choice whatsoever. So, that's where I'd like to come in. The person's diocese that this is happening in is Bishop Fulda.
Okay.
It's happening across the street from him. If people could, like, maybe send a little email to him, they're open, or a phone call, even asking if they got the email. You know, even if you aren't Catholic, say, you know, the guy who was the head of this, he claimed to be a religious person. He claimed to be Catholic, you know. Is this how you guys are? You know, bearing false witness, embezzling against the state? Is this what you teach people? You know, this is going on. People are being shipped. Kids are being taken. Don't you care about religious rights that this is not being tended to? This is happening across the street and to a multitude of people. You're supposed to be there for people's rights and to help your own. What's going on? Because I can tell you, they're not just against Christians. The Muslim guy that was there, he was getting pork thrown in his food all the time. There was one time where you're really pressured to eat the food, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, are you really going to eat that? Are you really going to eat that? He's like, oops. I could tell he, like, decided not to. He was going to do it for the pressure, but when you look at the ramifications of what he's thinking of, like, you know, a lot of Muslims believe they're going to hell if they eat pork. And that's another weird thing with my medical records. I want to quick bring that up. There was a Dr. Abraham. All of a sudden, I'm bringing up that I'm upset that I found bacon in my food. He's Muslim, and I'm the one being irrational. I go, okay, if bacon's okay, how about if you eat bacon? And also he's like, oh, I would never eat bacon. I would never eat bacon. He immediately backed himself into the wall, covered his heart with his hand, like all of a sudden it's the end of the world that I even brought it up. And all of a sudden, I'm the one being irrational? No, it's okay for him, but it's not okay for the inmates. It really is run like a prison. When you look at that thing on Rinse, or that connection of that Dr. Dave thing of what they were doing in the future, this is a secret prison. Sanford is running a secret prison. You can go in and say, I have brown hair and blue eyes, and then they can say, oh, that person's delusional. They think they have brown hair and blue eyes. No,
you know, that's a very interesting statement that you're making. So basically, you're saying that some of these psych hospitals are already operating as secret prisons. And this is why they're simply committing people.
It is a secret prison. You're not allowed any rights. It's one of the reasons I wasn't going to go to those meetings is anything that I said they were going to twist around against me. You know, when I was in the hospital, the reason my friend said, oh, yeah, they're going to take care of her and everything, oh, yeah, go ahead, take her, you know, because I can't carry her to the bathroom. She's not stable enough. Because I was holding on to the IV. At this point in time, I'm still like 105 pounds or something. And you're just like, no, she's not stable. I can't take her. I can't carry her to the bathroom. You got to take her. And then they write it on there, oh, he's worried about her mental capacity. He doesn't think she's stable.
Amazing, isn't it? Absolute fabrication, kind of inverting of the truth, really. Changing, contorting and inverting the truth. Extraordinary. So we should probably bring this session to a close pretty much, Kim. So
it's been long. Sorry, I've been babbling forever.
It's been a couple hours, but it's been an extraordinary story. And, perhaps what we should do is simply reiterate what you just asked people to do. You can call this hospital, you can mention this video to them, you can, let them know what's going on, and you can send the link to this video. You can also call the bishop and do as Kim suggests, perhaps, if you would like.
Well, the reason I bring up the bishop is because so many of these Christians claim to be Christians. And like I tell you, my cousin was, she knew that Malachi Martin. She was his book agent. And one of the things that he told her is, I told you how he was part of their intelligence services and everything. He said the reason John Paul I was murdered was because he got a list in all his discovery of all the Freemasons that were bishops and cardinals. And that night he was poisoned, and the following morning that list was taken away. He was going to publicly defrock them that day, and it was gone. So we're told in the last days 1/3 of the clergy will be working for Satan, 1/3 will be deceived into working for Satan. And we hear of these clergy response teams. We want to find out from Fulda, hey, how can this possibly be going on under your nose? Are you one of these Freemasons? What's going on? These are the people who are supposed to be looking out for people. Insanity being defined of doing the same thing again and again and getting the same outcome. Why are we keep going to these politicians that aren't doing anything, that are delphing us the whole way, just occupying our time? Let's go to these people where all of a sudden maybe they can rally a few more people and put pressure on it. There's safety in numbers. I found the greatest reaction from anyone is when you find someone who thinks, oh, I'm a spirit-filled, born-again Christian, I'll never take the chip. Oh, honey, you're already chipped. When you look at some of those chipping videos I gave you, I mean, virtually we're all chipped already. And then I get these things, and this one guy says, oh, I just went to the dentist, I hope I'm not chipped. And you go, good chance you are, honey. There's a reason the Masons took over all these professions. There's a reason Hitler pretty much held the medical profession. All this was done through them, and it's being done now through them. And this has to be, we have to draw attention to this. And who's supposed to be in charge of taking care of the people, their flock, Hey, these guys are supposed to be watching out for this. No, they're sleeping on the job. If he doesn't know about this, ask him, why don't you know about this? Because you know what? When I went to that church and I talked to some of those priests, they were completely aware of targeted individuals. They knew who they were, and they were aware of it.
Amazing.
They're telling me, oh, just quit, it's spelling in your coffee or something, just quit that and all of a sudden it'll go away. They aren't fully educated on it.
Yeah, so these are explosive, stories, pretty much everything that you've been saying. So we're going to have you on again, Kim, and, touch further on some of this information. It's very interesting that you've talked about the Satanist and the Masonic connection, in these hospitals and and everywhere, really, that kind of gives rise to situations like this, of the kind that you've described today. So, for now, I guess I just thank you for coming forward. Thanks for, being so candid and telling your story in such an engrossing way that I think all of us have been on the edge of our seats listening to you. And
one other thing, in case they take me out, I want to tell one other thing. The NSA boyfriend I had, in case that involves with anything, I want to totally disclose something.
Okay.
I forgot about that. I told you about that, how he told me he worked on the war games for Gulf War I. This is the only thing he told me. He said the war games, they made a list of everything the government was not supposed to do, and they told him not to go in there because the best case scenario they could possibly hope for was for civil war. And he said the government went out of their way to make sure everything on that list was done deliberately. I don't know what was on that list. He said they were given a list of things they weren't allowed to do, things they shouldn't do. If they wanted to bring peace and everything, they went out of their way to do everything on that list.
And this was where? In which war?
The first one, Gulf War I.
The first Gulf War.
Yep, they gave a list. This is what he claimed it, but he did not tell me what was on the list. He said
But you said earlier it was something to do with the Nuremberg Code, right? The Geneva Conventions, all of the war crimes, things that are considered war crimes.
No, that was a military guy in the...
Oh, I see.
I didn't hear anything about that.
Okay.
No, I can't tell you about that. That was the one thing that he told me that I think may be significant, because it's like each thing that happened in my life, I think I've been targeted all my life, but each instance that I run into like that seems to elevate it. I seem to get upgraded in the program each time I run into something like this. So I think I got the ultimate upgrade with whatever they did to me in the hospital with stuffing the stuff. Call the hospital and complain about the non-consensual human experimentation. If we're going to get a number of people to do that, because I know who did it and where it's done. Now if I can just prove it and get the chips thing, because I can definitely feel them, and they're always in the same place. And it only happened after I left the hospital. So I'm not like where I was just getting zapped. I know who did it.
Yeah, that in itself is extraordinary, and something to explore further. And I hope to keep talking with you, Kim, and we'll explore some of this a little bit further, and see if we can come back and do another podcast. But I would personally like to explore the subject with you a little further to see how far we can go in terms of finding out what exactly is going on and how this can be addressed and how this can be actually publicized, because people need to know. And, the reason we're having this conversation is to put it out there in the open. So.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for the opportunity, because just writing comments on YouTube doesn't do a lot. But you know what? Occasionally I run into some people and I go, oh my word, did you go to the Sanford in Florida? Your situation sounds very similar. And it's like, if I can get up an email long enough, I would like to hear these stories from other people, because I made it through, and I'm hearing a lot of horror stories. And apparently I didn't seem too unbalanced in there, because after I'm there for a period of time, all of a sudden people were addressing me thinking I worked there.
That's amazing. And I'm sure that once this video is posted, people will kind of contact you, and I think many people will be interested to hear your story, and hopefully will leave comments. We encourage everybody to leave comments if you have similar stories, if you have any information, anything to add to the story, or offer a directive in terms of how to pursue this investigation a little bit further, etc. Please leave a comment. This is just such an extraordinary story, and I'm so glad you made it out of that hospital alive and, with your medical records eventually. And kudos to you for having, taken initiative and found out about those phone calls that were blocked and written a letter to the judge, because ultimately it was that, you taking initiative in a self-empowered kind of way, that led to your absolute release from that place. And in the process, you found out about so much of the deception and corruption that was going on over there.
If I hadn't known people in the legal profession, I think I wouldn't have made it out. It's the fact that I knew some people who helped me, and a series of breaks, and just the phone card when I was in there so I could get phone calls out, because they didn't want me to get on the phone at all after I got the first records from the first hospital. This is very bad. If people could call and complain about these doctors who did these things, and ask the hospital how this has been done, and then call the cathedral. Yeah. Put the Bishop Fold on it. Why don't you know about this? Let's go about this a different tact. See if it makes any difference at all. It's worth a try.
Mm-hmm. It's worth a try. Yeah, good idea. Call the bishop instead of going to other so-called authorities. Try the bishop, apparently.
The bishop, he looks outside and you can see the parking lot. He's across the street. This is happening across the street. What are you doing? All your people around you are getting chipped. They can be GPSed and thrown on the train right at the end. Are you helping? Put them on. Are you clergy response? Let's find out. People, send an email to him. Send this link. See if it makes a difference. Mm-hmm. See if he's a good person or a bad person. Which side is he on? Expose him. Is he one of the Masonic bishops? I mean, the last bishop that left there, he ended up being archbishop, and he went to Denver. Well, nothing's going on in Denver, is there? I mean,
especially not beneath the airport.
Oh, no, nothing. Crazy conspiracy theorists.
Right. Forget those murals on the wall.
Yeah, the people that I've met in my lifetime that claim that they have direct knowledge of it has blown my mind. And you know what? Nobody's willing to come forward. And I'm out here hanging out on my own. And I know the people that have told me this stuff in Fargo, if they find out I said this, they'll never speak to me again. And I know it. But I saw what's happening to the people around there. And it's not right.
Yeah, and it's for that reason, that we all need to speak out of anything that we have witnessed, anything that we have seen, anything we are privy to knowing. If we've met people, if we've understood what's going on with them, this country is in a state of crisis. We really need to bring forward all of our stories so everybody can connect with each other and begin to understand, across the board what's going on. Because the first step, obviously, is, consciousness, awareness, becoming aware, and then addressing it, hopefully, in some way, as you suggest. So thanks for those great suggestions. And, we can throw it out to the people and ask them to perhaps take action along those lines if they feel inclined. So
even if you're an atheist or if you're another denomination, say, hey, you're exactly what I thought you were. You're doing nothing. Prove it. Hold his feet to the fire. Make him do something. And if you get a form letter back, you know what side he's on. He's one of the Masons. If he's not willing to dress it or he stalls, he's one of them. You will know them by their fruits. Does he expose himself as clergy response team? Thank you for your time.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kim, for coming forward. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And we'll come back soon with more on this story. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.